guys, we're here today to show you how to make these surgical face masks that a lot of the hospitals and doctors are asking for right now. So this is the pleated version that we're going to be making. This is just one way to make it. There are other patterns as well, but this is a pretty simple way, great for beginner sewists. So Braylon's going to make one for us today. She actually made this one already. It has the elastic on the sides that will hook around your ears. So to get started, you are going to need, so for us, we made our own little pattern. We measured 9 inches wide and 7 inches high. Then you just need some scrap fabric and elastic. So the elastic that we're going to use is actually, it says 1/8 of an inch. You could also use up to 1/4 of an inch for the elastic, or even headbands that you can buy at the store. You could cut those up and use those as well. So those are the materials. I will say that you prefer to have 2 different fabrics so that it's easy for the nurses and doctors to tell which side has been closest to their mouth that they go to put them on again. So we're going to have two different prints. So we just had a scrap of this gray and blue, and a scrap of gray. So let's go ahead and get started by prepping it up. So I'm going to stretch out. We can cut these 2 pieces up together just to save us some time. I did wash this fabric already because these masks will be sterilized at the hospitals and the doctor's offices, so they might shrink when they get washed. So we want to pre-shrink them. So I washed everything already. And with this solid fabric, there's not a right or wrong side necessarily. So we're just going to weigh that down. And then this is our pretty side. We're going to weigh pretty sides kissing right here. All right, so then we're going to go ahead and, this is like the perfect size. So you can just kind of pin that in place. If you can chalk it with only putting 4 pins in the corner, then that's fine. But if you want to put in an extra one, you can, just kind of depending on what you prefer. So she is pinning this, both pieces together, and then she's going to grab a piece of chalk and she will outline it with the chalk. She's using a white, which is fine. She's just being sure to push down really hard so she can see her line. Awesome. And then go ahead and take your pins out.
Oh, wait, I need one.
Yep, and then put one right there in the middle. And her line is pretty faint, so you might not be able to see it, but she can. So we'll go ahead and just have her cut along the line. Okay, there we go. Lost our scissors for a second. Go ahead and cut along your line there. Perfect. All right. Now, for the measurements for the elastic, I have read that most masks want 7 inches in length for the elastic. Now, if you're making this for yourself, you can kind of measure that against your own face and adjust it. But for this, we're just going to go with 7 inches, okay? So we'll cut 2 pieces of elastic that are 7 inches. So we'll cut it right at 7 inches. And then you can either measure it or duplicate it. So you can just go ahead and measure that again. Measure that again and cut it right at 7. Perfect. And now we'll just double check it to make sure they're the same size. And perfect, they're the same size. So that's all that we need for the cutting. So now we can start putting this together, okay? Okay, so now what we're going to need to do is measure. We're going to be marking a 1/2 inch down from the top corner and from the bottom corner. Okay, so what we're going to do is fold this. We'll just do pretty sides kissing. And I have a seam gauge that is marked at 1/2 inch, so that's the easiest way for me to mark that. We're gonna hold it. Now I'll actually have you do the spray one. You're gonna measure a 1/2 inch and then just use scissors and just do a little snip right there at that 1/2 inch. Okay. You don't wanna go too deep, just kind of a little snip to keep it marked. There you go, that's good. And then do the same thing on that end. Okay, so now we're gonna open it up and you can see there are just a little snips, so it's not very deep, and they're just at the 4 corners, okay? So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna use those little snips that you made, and we are gonna be putting this elastic. We're gonna match up our raw edges, and we're gonna put the elastic at those 2 marks. So you have your little snip that you made right here. We're gonna line up that piece of elastic right above the snip, so the snip is right there. We're gonna line it up right above there. Best thing to do is grab a pin and pin it in place. So now it's going to be held up. So we're going to sew this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So we want that elastic to be right above where our seam allowance is at, okay? And then you're going to take this piece and keep it straight. We don't want it to get twisted. And we're going to line it up here as well. So find that little snip. You could also use a fabric marker or a pin to mark that as well. Just kind of depends on what tools you have and what's the easiest way to do it. So I will pin that in place. All right, and we'll have Braylon do the other side.
Wait, she'll sit in here. Did you do it right on the snip?
Yeah.
Below or above?
Right above it.
Okay.
You have your pin. If you're having a hard time using a pin, you could also even grab a piece of Scotch tape and kind of tape it in place.
Above.
Because the elastic is pretty skinny, so it's a little bit harder to pin in place.
Done.
Okay, so now you'll see this kind of like, oops.
There you go.
Perfect. So you can see it kind of bunches up a little bit, and that's okay because in the end it will get pleated up, so it will become smaller. But for right now, we're just going to kind of work it like this. What you're going to do now, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we will baste that elastic in place. So we will use the edge of the presser foot as a guide. So it's about 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you'll just backstitch, start and backstitch those 4 spots, okay? All right. Okay, so we're back at the sewing machine now. What we're going to do is line up the edge of the fabric and the elastic with the edge of the presser foot. Move it on this way. And you're going to be okay to leave that pin in. Just go ahead and sew over top of it. And I want you just to sew 3 stitches, and then we can do a back stitch, okay? And you can take that pin out since you went over top of it. We'll put that in a magnet. And right now we're just securing the elastic so it stays in place. Once you have sewn over top of the elastic, do another back stitch, go forward, and lift your needle. And you're going to do that at all 4 spots of elastic. So now line it up for your next one. Okay, so she has secured all 4 sides of the elastic now. If you see, you can kind of see the stitching right there. Okay, so now, Braylon, what you're going to do is you're going to take this other piece that you cut, this gray piece, you're going to line those up pretty sides kissing. Okay? And go ahead and clip all the way around. You need to remember to do what?
Leave a hole.
Leave a hole. We're going to leave a hole at the bottom so that you can flip it out, okay? So you have those 2 pins there to leave a hole at the bottom. And now you're going to go sew all the way around. Okay, so since we're going to be sewing around the perimeter of the mask, we are going to mark our seam allowances. So for this, I will be using a 1/2 inch as our seam allowance. So I marked a 1/2 inch from the needle over to the blue tape. And we are going to be doing corners. We're going to pivot the corners as well. But I also want to mark this line right there is a 1/2 inch, so we're going to line 1/2 inch from there. Another way you can tell is by using a seam gauge to measure from the spot of your needle to where your tape is, okay? Okay, so now we have our clips and then the 2 spots where we will leave a hole. So what I like to do is start where one of the pins are at. So we're gonna line that up with the tape. We'll go over the presser foot and take that pin around, and you're gonna go ahead and sew around all 4 corners, stopping when you get back to that pin, the second pin that you put in. And you wanna make sure you backstitch. She went just a little too far, so she's going to backstitch to get back to where the corner meets up, and then you can turn it. Now as she approaches that pin, you can stop and do a back stitch. Do 3 stitches backwards, 1, 2, 3, and then 3 stitches forward, and then you can be all done. Okay, so now she has sewn all 4 corners, and we have a hole just about the size of our hand right there. Before we go to turn this right sides out, we're going to trim off the extra fabric from the corners. Okay. Being careful not to cut through your stitch line. It's just going to help reduce the bulk in the corner once you go to flip it out. So that you cut your 4 corners off, you can go ahead and turn it right side out using that hole that you left in the bottom. Also a stick right here that you can use to poke out the corners too. We have special sewing sticks, but you could also use maybe like a chopstick or a pencil, just nothing too sharp or pokey, so you don't want to use scissors, but just something that you can kind of softly and gently poke the corners out. Yeah, perfect. So now we have just a little pillowcase of the elastic, but what we're going to do now is go to the ironing board and press it out and make our pleats. Okay, so now we're going to first just iron this flat so it looks polished. And we're going to now get ready for the pleats, okay? Okay. So we want to flip this over. So now we have our wrong side or inside facing up. We're going to fold this in half.
Hot dog style.
Hot dog style, you are right. We're going to iron it just to make a crease, okay? We're going to open it back up. And we're going to take this folded edge and fold it up to meet that center crease we just made. So we're pretty much just dividing this into 4s. We're going to quarter it out. We're going to flip it around and do the same thing to this piece. Okay. I like steam, we all know that. Woo! I could probably reduce the steam. Okay, so now we have 4 creases that we're going to use to guide it to do our pleats. I also have the seam gauge. So what you're going to do, we're going to measure just a 1/2 inch from the bottom, and we're going to make that fold that we made, that bottom fold, we're going to fold it up to a 1/2 inch, okay? And we'll grab a pin, and we'll pin it in place. Now what you're going to do, I'm going to have you do this one. Once you do a 1/2 inch from this fold that we just made, and you're going to fold that up to meet that 1/2 inch, and then put a pin in place.
Okay.
1/2 inch from that fold and take that crease that we made and bring it up. So now you have 3 pleats going in the same direction. They're actually going down. On that side, we're gonna do the same thing over here, okay?
Okay.
So this time, they're gonna follow in the same direction. You're just gonna use that gauge. Go 1/2 inch, knock it down, and pin it. Right. So now what you have the pleats all going in the same direction. They're all going down. And we're going to go sew all the way around the edge, and that's going to sew those pleats into place, okay?
Okay.
We're going to be sewing all around the mask. Now, how close to the edge you sew is really going to depend on you and your comfort level. Braylon is pretty experienced with her sewing, so she can go pretty close to the edge. She's going to sew basically 1/8 of an inch around the edge. However, if you are a little newer to sewing, you could even use the edge of the presser foot as your guide as well. So honestly, it just kind of depends on you and what your comfort level is. So for Braylon, I'm going to move her tape over, and you might adjust it. Now for us, we've found the easiest place to start is right where that hole is at. I like to avoid starting where the fabric is really thick, because it's kind of like if you start running up a hill in the middle of the hill, it's really hard to get going. So we actually want to start where the fabric is not bulky, okay? So for us, we're going to start right by this hole. I'm just going to line it up to the edge here. And I just put a cheap piece of tape down there to kind of help her guide it. And she also has a spot that she watches on the presser foot as well. So go ahead and start and do a back stitch. Braylon's having a little hard time getting it going over that corner there, so she's going to use the purple thing that we've talked about. So the purple thing just kind of helps move the fabric along, because we don't want to stick our fingers underneath that presser foot. And again, sometimes the corners just get thick, so it gets a little harder for the machine to move. You could also use a pencil, or sometimes I've even used a pin just to kind of move it along a little. When she gets back to where she started, she'll do another back stitch. Cut your strings. You can cut the strings and take the pins out. Alright guys, so that's it. She's all done. One mask down. Alright, and then there are other ways, so we will do another video to show you another option. Bye.